course, from the Kosciuszko County Health Department, Dr. William Remington. We'll each have a little chance to discuss our angle on this pandemic in our community, and then we'll take questions from our reporters here from Times Union, WRSW, and Ink Free. So thank you all for coming today. Yesterday, Executive Order 2018 from the governor took effect, and it will be in effect through April 20th. I know there was some a little bit more substance to that executive order than the first stay-at-home order, and before we kind of get into that, I did want to have Commissioner Jackson talk just a little bit about how the county and I think the city have pretty much agreed that following the leadership of our governor and our president is important. Brad?
Yeah, thank you. And I'd say that, so, and this is a good thing, the city and the county work very well together all the time, but especially now, it's extra important. But our stance with the county is that we're following what the governor set forth. We're trying not to run ahead of him, but he has a lot of people there at the state that are working full-time, checking the data and trying to make the best decisions, so it just doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel. And the other thing I guess that I thought of is the fact that he's making, because he has to, he's making more of a one-size-fits-all type of mandate for the whole state, so that if it's adequate for like Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, your larger population areas, then it should be on the side of caution for our area, if that makes sense. So I still feel good about the fact that we're just staying with the governor. The one thing I would like you guys, if you could get out, is our summer residents. We appreciate it, and they bring a lot to our community in a lot of ways. But if they're coming from a hot spot, we would really encourage them to please do the 14-day quarantine period, just to keep this area as minimal as possible as far as infections.
Yeah, and Brad, I know we talked at our first meeting last week about how I think we may be fortunate in our community, in our county, to be a little bit ahead of the game with a lot of these restrictions. I know our numbers, and we'll hear from Dr. Remington in a minute, have gone up since last, and they were kind of seemed like they were going up during the meeting last Friday, but we anticipate that. But I think having a lot of this stuff in place before we have really seen a large increase is going to be helpful. And I appreciate your comments on that. By the way, if you want to see the copies of the executive orders that the governor has issued, I think there's been 18 to date, they can be accessed at in.gov, and then just type in executive order, and they'll all pull up, and you can read those all verbatim. So to that end, I wanted to talk a little bit locally about that order and some of the things the governor had talked about. Obviously, essential travel is on the mind. I hear a lot every day from folks who have concerns about essential travel, have concerns about going out and shopping, and I'm hearing many different sides of this thing, and understand that it's not an easy issue. But I know the governor did asked specifically in his executive order to limit the number of household members who travel to and enter stores for the purpose of making purchases. Again, that's just one of those common sense things. I don't think that there's any store here locally that has restricted so many people from coming in per family, if you will, although I know one store is limiting to age 16 and above. And I did talk to another store that I think next week is going to start just allowing one shopper per household unless there's extenuating circumstances. So again, I think it's more of an idea for folks to understand, just don't pile the family in the car to get out for an outing to go to the store. It's not only endangering our other citizens, but it's endangering the workforce who's a little bit skittish now, working in areas where the public is coming in, and To that end, I went out Monday, I went out to the large stores, the grocery stores and home improvement stores, and talked to all the managers on Monday to find out, in anticipation of this executive order taking effect yesterday, what they had planned on doing. And I got 2 more calls this morning. There's actually 3 stores in our community and there may be more. A lot of this was being discussed at corporate levels as I was meeting with these store managers, but I know there are 3 stores for sure that are taking the lead. Walmart has they're only allowing 1 entrance in and out. They've limited their numbers in the store from 5,500 capacity down to they're only going to allow 1,000 people in, so they're only allowing approximately 20% of their capacity into the store. I got a call from Owens yesterday, and they corporately decided to limit to half of their capacity. I got a call from Aldi's this morning. They've got a set number of folks they're going to allow into the store, including their customers and employees. So there's several stores corporately are taking the lead, and there's several others. I know Meijer and Lowe's I talked to, they are discussing with corporately what they're going to do. I anticipate that with the governor's order to try and limit the number of visitors, that all of these stores are again, trying to protect our community as well as their employees. So that's going on. I did talk to 1 store, and I won't mention the name just because I'm not sure they have or will enact it, but there was discussion about doing temperature scans on customers before they go in. But I don't know that that's been implemented, and we'll just kind of wait and see on that one. So with regards to the stores, let's see, I would just ask that again, the community practice some restraint when it comes to shopping, only for essential items, and to only travel to and from the store potentially with a single shopper. I know sometimes it's tough if you need assistance shopping, and I think if that's the case, maybe it's best to try and find someone that can shop for you. I know sometimes families are in a pinch and don't have child care, and mom has to get some milk, and if you have to do it, you have to do it. But I know a lot of the stores would be most appreciative if it were all limited to single shoppers in this very, very difficult time. The next thing I wanted to talk about that was again listed on the governor's executive order and things that I've been getting calls about. Basically, the governor's prohibited any playgrounds from being open in the community, and I know there's a lot of police tape around swing sets, and it really just, it's hard for me as a mayor to take that. All the wonderful amenities that we've got, the weather's getting nice, we need that exercise, but again, following the state and federal guidelines, those are places where contamination can occur, does occur, will occur if we leave those areas open. To that end, I know the open areas in the parks are being kept open so that folks can go out and take a stroll, walk the dog. Again, practicing safe distances. I know when I was in the stores Monday, I would guess more than half the folks had masks on, and I'm going to ask Dr. Remington to talk about that. But that's just one other, possible way, I think, to prevent those that maybe have it but don't know they have it from keeping it to themselves, if you will. But there is an issue with our playgrounds. We have put signs up. We've taken some calls both ways, people that don't think that are complaining about it, and then people that are complaining about closing some of our recreational sites at our parks. But we're following the orders of our president and our governor, and again, to try and interpret that locally. I think we'll start a slippery slope if we start making decisions on what we're going to do and what we're not going to do. We also are not allowed to do anything less restrictive in our communities by those executive orders. So campgrounds, I think Brad, you and I talked about that yesterday. Campgrounds are essentially closed unless and that comes directly from the state order, and you don't have a residence, a permanent residence. So the example would be someone who maybe takes their RV to Florida and then comes back in the summertime, and we actually have 3 such cases out at our campground. We have notified all the rest of the campers that the campgrounds will be closed with the exception of those 3 people who are in RVs and have no residence per the directive from the governor. And we are having them sign affidavits that that is indeed true. So if you look at our campground, you may see no more than, I think, 3 or 4 campers because we don't have cabins. Those are the only exceptions. And again, that's per the executive order. So our campground will be very light this year, at least through April 20th, which is when the governor's order runs out, although I fully anticipate that's going to continue for a while, but at least up to the point of the executive order, we've notified all those that were coming to the campgrounds that that's not going to happen this year. The last thing I want to talk about before I share the microphone, we've got some really great things going on in this community, and I want people to understand how this community, like many other communities, are coming together. United Way, Darren Bickle has taken the lead, putting together a weekly go-to meeting with community folks that are involved with food issues, housing issues, domestic violence issues, homelessness issues, and really working as kind of a core group to manage resources with all the players in our community here, and hats off to him. School corporations are doing a marvelous job of getting meals out to the kids, and I just can't thank all the volunteers and employees at the schools under the direction of the superintendents to get the food out. I know they're dropping off, they're delivering, they're doing everything they can, and they're literally getting thousands of meals out since this thing has started, and are continuing to do that. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the generosity of the foundations and others that are just trying to support the missions of all these non-for-profits that are trying to navigate this crisis. I know there's Ken Locke of the Salvation Army. There's just, I don't even want to start mentioning, although I just did. There's just too many of them to try and list, and they all need help, and they're all out really working hard to kind of get those folks that are falling through the cracks and they're going to have difficulties. So again, my thanks to them. And I know the foundation, Community Foundation, K21, Zimmer Biomed Foundation, and United Way have kind of taken the lead on donations to those groups, and they're certainly by example fostering more donations to those groups as well. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Bill Remington. I asked him to talk a little bit about just our general update, where we stand today, and to maybe talk a little bit about testing, and then potentially talk about CDC's new recommendations on wearing masks in public. So, Dr. Bill?
Thank you. I have sad news this morning. I was notified about an hour ago of the passing of the first COVID-19 patient in this county. As I understand the case, the gentleman was in his 70s and passed away at our local hospital. Those are all the details I have at this time. Condolences to the family. That's very sobering news. We knew it would come, but nonetheless it hits deeply this morning. Our case count, I believe, is now at 16 as of my phone call to Teresa Reed 30 minutes ago. The cases that we identify positively with those tests, of course, underrepresent the issue. The tests are important. They're difficult to get to. So many patients appropriately are managed on a clinical level, making appropriate clinical decisions without having a definitive diagnosis. So this is no time for this county to take their foot off the gas with all the things that we've been hearing about the social distancing. It is important that 6-foot radius for droplet transmission is still a foundational piece in how we think. Hand washing is very good. Masking, yes. If you are in public and need to step into an environment where it would be very difficult to, or uncertain as to your ability to be successful with social distancing, then you should wear a non-medical mask. A simple scarf will do. In most medical environments, I believe there is a universal medical grade masking protocol at this point, which is very appropriate. This is going to be a while yet. I was asked last week which inning we're in, and if this was a 9-inning ball game, I'd say we're in the 3rd, maybe 4th inning. But I want to emphasize the next 2 to 3 weeks will likely where we see the apex of the surge, the top of the mountain, if you will. So don't let those official case counts, which seem so low, 14, 15, 16 cases, fool you. Again, it underrepresents the issue. As our unfortunate announcement this morning of the first death, you can be sure our healthcare facilities on the front line are now seeing this thoroughly. And the next 2 weeks will be particularly heavy for them. So support your first responders, healthcare workers that you know, encourage them in some way. Be respectful of the things you can do to mitigate the risk as an individual and to mitigate the risk as a community. There will be increasing discussion of another facet of testing, since the mayor asked here, and that will be the antibody test. It's a blood test. The FDA has allowed emergency use authorization for release of some of these products. They are not thoroughly vetted. We don't perfectly know how to place that information. That is, if you have a positive 15-minute test for an antibody, what does that mean for you? Are you immune from a subsequent infection, or does that mean that somehow you're contagious now, even if you have no symptoms? Or does that mean that you were infected within a matter of weeks? And that's important to note. All those details have not been thoroughly vetted. But it's of great interest. We all want to know, don't we, as to whether or not we may have seen this virus already. So watch for the utility of a blood test, not just the nasal test, but a blood test to reflect the previous infection of this virus. The nasal testing, the nasopharyngeal testing, of course, is still foundational, still difficult to get to. There's an algorithm to think through, and we're trying to make sure we have plenty of supplies for those on the front lines, those patients most ill, hitting the emergency room, being admitted to the local hospital. Thank you.
All right. Just kind of along that line with the masks, I did talk to a group yesterday, and I know there's a lot of community members that are sewing masks. I think, wasn't that one of the recommendations of the CDC that, the medical grade mask should be left to the healthcare providers? And what's your recommendation for those types of masks you think should be worn in public?
Yeah, sure. Sewing guilds making masks are great. Make plenty of masks. In the hospital setting, they would not be used typically, unless it's maybe to throw one on a visitor that didn't have one walking into the building. But healthcare workers would still be using medical grade masks. Clerks at stores may appreciate a homemade mask if they haven't had time to make one. You heading out to a store, you just cannot avoid that trip, should have a simple homemade mask on. There's all kinds of recipes out there. The CDC just this last weekend posted a couple recipes of their own.
And I've been made aware that if you have a group that are making masks, those can be dropped off at Parkview, at the Salvation Army, and the Kosciuszko County Health Department are taking those homemade masks, accepting those. So That was just information that was passed along to me. There's probably others, and I'd love to add anyone else to that list if there is, but those are the three that I was made aware of. Sheriff Dukes, you and I discussed a little before the conference here this morning, the latest executive order, and the governor has created an enforcement response team to try and manage some of the concerns in communities if there are some issues with the executive order. The way we read that executive order, it's law enforcement agencies, state law enforcement agencies, but not Indiana State Police. So any law enforcement agency, state law enforcement agency, I think the example is the excise police, and there's a few others that you can probably elaborate on. They are basically going to run the enforcement of this latest executive order. They'll be working with the State Department of Health, I think the local Department of Health, and potentially the prosecutor. The idea is again, this is more of a common sense approach well, go ahead. I don't want to take your thunder. Go for it.
You're doing a phenomenal job. But Mr. Mayor, thank you for inviting me here this morning. Truly an honor to be able to speak and present. But I want to, before I answer your question here, I just want to kind of hit home on something that Chief Whitaker did last week. That law enforcement, we jumped out ahead of this early and realized that every department needed to be on the same page and playing by the same set of policies and procedures. And I'm proud to say that every department in police department in Kosciuszko County, including the Department of Natural Resources, the Indiana State Police, the prosecutor's office, we've all agreed, and that has been a tremendous help. And speaking of law enforcement, this team that we have formed, once a week, we have a conference call and we talk about the week, we talk about issues, problems, what is going well. And I also want to give a shout out to Dan Hampton, prosecutor of the Kosciuszko County. He's been a huge help in this. But to tell the great people of Kosciuszko County that you are safe, and knowing that if one of our police officers gets sick and it spreads, that we have a game plan and that will take effect, and we're all going to be one team. And the city police have agreed to if it takes, then we'll get from Syracuse to Pierceton if we have to, and we'll divide the county up into sections. So it's been a phenomenal working relationship with those departments in the prosecutor's office. I'm happy to report that law enforcement, we're healthy. And looking at it, as sheriff of the county, one of my biggest stress levels is the jail, in worrying about what would happen if the virus would get into our jail. So every morning, First Sergeant Shane Coney, which is the jail commander, we meet and we talk. And I'm happy to say that our jail is virus-free from the corona epidemic that we're going through, and taking the proactive measures that we have to take. And to be honest with you, Mr. Mayor, and to Mr. Jackson, Mr. Commissioner, that we've had to change some of our policies and procedures. We've had to. And I want to emphasize to the people of Kosciuszko County that our jail is not closed. I received several phone calls asking, Sheriff, why did you close our jail? Or, Sheriff, are you releasing any inmates? And the jail is not closed. We are trying to run business as normal. And I made the decision when we first started this that we are not releasing any inmates. So I can tell you that as of a half hour ago when I came in here, the population of our jail was 225 people. Yeah. So absolutely, we haven't been at that low numbers, but again, I credit that to the once a week meetings with law enforcement. We have now having conference calls with our local judges. We are having once-a-week conference calls with our health providers. Dr. Emmett, thank you. Thank you for the emails, the constant emails, the bar charts, the explanations. You know, as sheriff, it's easy for me to go out and do law enforcement type of things, but to grasp this, it's tough, and thank you for taking the proactive measures. But I believe as sheriff that it's important that we have to rely on the people of Kosciuszko County to make the proper decisions for them and their family. I believe we're doing a great job too. So going back to your question on the executive order by the Governor Holcomb, again, this enforcement response team is made up of state agencies. It's not made up of the sheriff's office. It's not made up of local police departments. But again, it talks about, I know this morning there was on Facebook a lot of comments on headlines about business owners going to jail, and that's not what we're wanting to do. That's not what we're doing. And there's a lot of things into play before that even happens. So if I could stress to the people that take a breath, relax as much as possible here, and that we're relying on you as moms and dads and grandpas and grandmas to make the right decisions for your families.
All right, thank you. And again, I think we heard, like you said last week, I know the police chiefs and town marshals and all are getting together and you know, getting very well coordinated. And I know first responders and fire and the county fire department are all doing the same thing. I think they have a call every morning. And again, as fluid as this situation is, I'm very impressed with our police and fire and the entire county group on both sides, how they are staying up on this thing, and I thank you for that. Commissioner, I'll give you the last word. Anything you want to talk about as far as any county offices that I know you guys are still trying to provide services, receive taxes, although I know that deadline has been extended, and any comments before we take questions?
I would just say, you know, at the county, we're trying our best to continue to deliver the services without actually, you know, having people come in. And I know in talking to different department heads and stuff here the last few days, they are staying really busy. I know Dan at Area Plan said that they've had a huge amount of calls. So, I mean, there's things they're able to handle via phone, which is obviously safer. We do appreciate all the people, and especially to the sheriff's point, the people in the jail are the ones that really, I think, are right there on the front lines with more trouble social distancing and stuff. And we really appreciate what they're doing for us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Those unseen, kind of behind the scenes. So we appreciate that. So.
All right, thank you. All right, so with that, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Can you guys grab the mic? That'll be helpful. Thank you.
2 questions for the sheriff. First off, can you specifically say what the executive order is that you're going to enforce, law enforcement is looking at, that the governor issued? I think I heard that at least once.
The executive order, essentially, he has created an emergency response team, and their charge is to enforce the executive order. It's kind of at the state level. It's even more so at the Department of Health level.
Is it travel and stores, or?
Pardon me? Everything in that executive order.
Okay.
So I think our local law enforcement gets involved if there's a complaint. And again, Sheriff, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, so Dan, to answer your question, so the executive order that Governor Holcomb put out, he has created a enforcement response team to take the proactive steps to make sure the businesses are abiding by this, the essential, non-essential, and so forth. But I just want to emphasize that this enforcement response team is made up of state agencies and not local or county. That again, we put our trust into the people of Kosciuszko County to make the right decision as far as staying open or not staying open.
And also, you mentioned that jail population is pretty low right now. but you haven't taken any action to reduce it, so how did the population lower on its own?
Yeah, so we have taken actions to lower it. So again, my game plan on day one was that the Kosciuszko County Jail is not a free holding facility for our local prisons. We are still transporting prisons or people to prison that need to go there. We took 5 inmates down to prison last week that were sentenced by Kosciuszko County judges. It's business as usual. We're not a holding facility. I made that quite clear on January 1st of 2019 that we were done doing that. At the end of the day, it's going to save Kosciuszko County financially, safety. But no, sir, it's business as normal, Kosciuszko County Jail.
And one more, do you envision any changes possible if the circumstances change?
So, right now, probably our biggest thing is the policies and procedures that we had to change in our jail is, if somebody is incarcerated, we are putting them in a holding cell for 48 hours. We are taking their temperature constantly. We are giving them medical attention as far as how are you feeling? Are you coughing? Do you have a sore throat? Do you have a headache? I could see us implementing more of that. But again, it's at 225 people. Our jail legally holds 294. We're in a really good spot right now. But, Commissioner Jackson, thank you for thanking the jail officers right now, because they are earning every dollar they're making, because the 225 people, they don't understand the severity of this. And my jail officers they're earning their paychecks. It's a tough job right now being a jail officer. You're welcome, sir.
I think it's really good that you were able to lower that population ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Because if we were at capacity or just over, we would have a real mess on our hands right now, so thank you for.
No.
Sheriff, just
following through and doing
to
that.
ask one more question
Yeah.
along that lines. I think I saw in St. Joe County, their sheriff had talked about arrest procedures might be a little bit different. I can't think of the term, but they will file the report with the prosecutor and then they'll issue a warrant at a later time. Is that a specific protocol that we
Yeah, so
talked about?
sitting down with the prosecutor and all the police chiefs that, right now, and, I keep using the term business as usual, but, if a crime has been committed, paperwork can be filed to the prosecutor's office for review, and then Mr. Hampton then makes a decision, should we issue a warrant or should we not? So, that is being done probably more now than it has in the past, but again, we're out and about, and we're trying to be as proactive as we can during these hard times.
Thank you. Mr. Sloan?
A question for Dr. Remington first. I got a voicemail yesterday of a guy, he was talking about how they always see the numbers of people who were tested and people who positive, but he left the message was that he didn't see any numbers of people recovering. Is it too early to know what kind of recovery rate is? Or has it seen some recovery? And also he was wanting to know in a voicemail, once you get COVID, are you immune, or is it, again, still too early to tell?
We have certainly seen patients recovered from COVID. I do not have that statistically, numerically for you. Again, our total confirmed case count is so low. But as that number inevitably builds, we'll break that out as to how sick they were, how many are recovered. Statistically, it's difficult to give meaningfulness to that discussion right now. So many patients have COVID that have not come to a confirmed diagnosis of course, and that selection bias, if you will be to those with milder disease. So all of those will have recovered. It is unclear as to how durable the immunity is after an infection. I'm sure there is at least partial protection. How thorough, how long, what that means if this COVID virus shifts a little bit, genetically is not clear.
Dr. Remington, if I could ask you a question, sir. As sheriff, I get hit up all the time on these over-the-counter kits, these tests that you can do for employees. What's your advice on that? Are they almost 100%? Would you recommend I mean, give me some advice here, please, sir.
You know, I watched a news clip 2 nights ago of first responders, 2 firemen, doing one of those little kits.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to think, I wouldn't perfectly know what to do with that information. And I have looked into this topic quite a bit, and I still would say that. I don't perfectly know what to do with that information. I think the day is coming where there'll be a lot more of that done. We all want to know, and it's just going to take a while for the science to be vetted regarding them. That emergency use authorization by the FDA pushed those out, but they haven't honestly been vetted. And if you read their small print, as I did this morning on one of those manufacturers, they clearly state that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my other question to Kyle Dukes. The jail population is down, but do you see an increase in calls, and what kind of calls? I'm guessing domestic would be my likely, but...
So, David, that's a good question. Right now, our call volume is low. So, you know, Dan Hampton and I and Scott Whitaker and I, we've had a lot of conversations on this because this is an area in law enforcement that, you know, we're concerned about it. At what point in time is our call volume starting to, you know, going to go up? We are in the last 4 days starting to see a small increase in verbal and physical altercations, fights. But, you know, right now, I can tell you that our deputy sheriffs are patrolling our neighborhoods, trying to be seen. But, you know, that is a question that time will tell. But I can tell you that our call volume is still low.
Dr. Remington, I saw yesterday in California there was a suggestion or a new mandate, I'm not sure, that anyone entering a commercial business will be asked to wear a mask, maybe mandated. Do you see that coming to a point here?
As I mentioned already, I think it's wise to consider that. Whether the governor would make that a mandate for the state, whether we would choose locally to make that a mandate, I'd say would be out there. I think the CDC's position is it's a recommendation, particularly if you feel that social distancing would be easily violated. So it's not a mandate even from the CDC directive.
Mr. Mayor, are all city basketball courts being shut down?
And I really don't mean to laugh. I know we had some complaints. I've talked with our Parks Department, and we started this whole thing out just closing down the actual playground portions. But we found that as folks, you know, the weather got nice, all of a sudden people started coming out. The whole idea is to avoid these congregations, of more than 10 people, and within that required social distancing of 6 feet. And it's hard to play basketball even with 10 people and stay 6 feet apart. And we've just decided that that was the right thing to do. I asked Larry Plummer yesterday to inactivate those courts locally, and you know, I just hate doing that. You know, this is Indiana. This is basketball. It's a way for people to get out and let off some steam, but it's just one of the harsh realities of where we are right now. And I don't like closing the beaches. I don't like closing the parks. I don't like closing the campgrounds. And again, we haven't closed the parks. The parks are still open, but as defined in the executive order, playgrounds are closed. In those areas where we feel it important to discourage folks from gathering is unfortunately where we're at right now.
there's been a couple events lately, and I don't know who directed this, like where they have the cars come to the hospital and shine their lights in the hospital. Everyone stayed in their car, and then they're having places where they're giving out food. Are those places, I guess, they're nice, but are they safe, or are is enough things being put into place at those kind of events where they are safe, they're not?
Well, I can address the distribution of food. Those are specifically allowed by the executive order, but with the caveat that social distancing and adequate precautions are taken.
I think they're a wonderful gesture. Keep doing them. I don't see them at high risk, and not to sound like an old record, but stick with the social distancing thing.
Yeah, there was discussion about, I know both pro and con, and you know, I don't want to go into, I know that meant a lot to the healthcare workers out at the hospital. I know some people didn't feel comfortable with it. I talked to many people who were there and felt like they were in their cars, and there was not any concern that way. You know, I've taken many calls these last few weeks, and there's certainly a level of uncertainty. There's a level of concern. There's quite a bit of anxiety. You know, reading news stories, and every news story on television is regarding COVID. No offense to any of you all, but the majority of your posts and news items are COVID related. It's overwhelming, the information that's being provided. I know when I talk Commissioner about doing something like this locally, and I think this is important to get the local information out, but you know, we just decided to do this once a week so that we weren't overwhelming folks with this information. And locally, folks want to know what's going on, and we figure this is a great way with cooperation of you all with getting this out on our streaming and Facebook. This is a way to get this information out. But that being said, you know, people need to continue to try and live their lives. And if it means watching church on television or as a streaming sermon, somehow I think Father Jonathan Sacred Heart knows if I'm watching or not, whether he can see me or not. And I think we all feel the need to participate in some form of worship, especially this week. It's a tough week. The governor addressed that yesterday. And, you know, people don't want to be told not to worship. People don't want to be told that you're not going to the playgrounds. You can't go to a restaurant and a bar. And, you know, these are things that 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, we would have looked at each other and said, are you kidding me? Or are we really going to be under that type of restriction? But I think given the obvious global concerns, you know, we've heard we've got a death in our county now. This is it's not on our doorstep. It's in our backyard. It's in our houses, and we have to follow the wisdom of the public health officials first and foremost, and rely on government officials to apply those to make this thing slow down and hopefully get through this. We're all mindful of our liberties as civilians, and you know, we don't want those infringed upon. But I think, you know, it's an issue. I was kind of thinking about this yesterday, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, but it's like wearing a seatbelt. You know, nobody's going to tell me I have to wear a seatbelt, but the seatbelts are there for a reason, to protect us. And I kind of look at what's going on right now as an extreme case of that, which I haven't talked to anybody that in their lifetime remembers going through a situation like this, and why this is also important. So I know there's a balance, but get back to your question. You know, it's the anxiety that people are having right now. I get that. I understand that. You know, again, I said it last week. Enjoy your family with the time you've got with them. Enjoy the downtime. to get some things done, and you know, let's just all do our part and try and get through this. Mr. Spalding.
Last question. Can you tell us how many people are currently hospitalized as a result of?
I don't have that number. We're going to work on developing that. I'm sorry, that is not automatically reported to us, so we'll try to get that number with our daily briefings in the next few days. Make that a part of our presentation. Yeah.
Anybody else?
My last question.
Dave?
The other counties in the state that are similar to Kosciuszko County, population, rural, whatever, are they experiencing the similar counts? Or is that something you know offhand? Or?
Yeah, you know, I just clicked through the state's dashboard map yesterday, county by county, and I didn't calculate a ratio of population to cases, but the case count is quite variable. There are counties with a much lower population than ours, with significantly more cases. So I don't see us standing head and shoulders oddly above another county. Again, I think a lot of these case counts reflect the availability of testing, which has been imperfect. So who knows what the real case count is, county by county.
And as far as testing goes, can we see improvement in that?
It will. There's still supply chain issues, from the amount of test tubes to swabs, reagent, let alone the kits themselves. It will get better.
Comment? Chief Wilson?
So we want to make sure that the community, they're going to see us looking a little different. We've had a couple of questions about why are you wearing what you're wearing. It's not that, you know, and the question came to me, are you afraid to come to our door? It's not that, it's that we're wearing the mask and the long sleeve protection and gloves to protect you from the cases that we could have just come from. So it's more of a aspect for the community that you're going to see law enforcement, EMS, firefighters throughout the whole county doing this more as a help in not spreading anything that we could have contracted ourselves in the community. So we're still there. Every morning, the leaders of emergency services do communicate with me, and we pass along from the health department any updates that they have for us. That goes out to all the law enforcement, fire services. We're not looking at what we can do tomorrow, as we're planning for weeks ahead. So but one of the things we wanted to comment to you was what we're doing with our personal protection isn't just as much to protect us, it's to protect you as a community from what we may have been exposed to.
All right, thank you. All right, I want to make one final comment. I know we get questioned, I'm sure the county and the city, as to why certain things are happening, why certain businesses are open, why certain aren't, and especially with regards to local industry. We received some guidance back in March 19th. Department of Homeland Security, the federal Department of Homeland Security, came out with a memo that was guiding on the essential critical infrastructure workforce. It defined what is essential and what is not. And I think that document is what the governor is using when he prepares his executive orders. So we're not in the position to pick and choose what we consider essential and what we don't consider essential. I think as we started out and as we should probably finish up, don't you agree? We're still pretty much in lock force with what the governor and the federal government. So, I do have a copy of that document if anybody wants to see it. It comes again from a Department of Homeland Security, Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, and it was dated March 19th, well before this whole thing started. So, with that, any final?
Yeah,
Sheriff?
Yes, sir. So, a couple things here, and I promise I won't take too much time, but, you know, I asked the people of Kosciuszko County to please pray for law enforcement, our first responders, our healthcare workers, because these brave men and women are putting their lives on the line each and every day. Amazing group of people, amazing team, and you know, thank you. And you know, Mr. Mayor, there's one group of people that have kind of taken a back seat here that I've noticed on Facebook that are amazing teachers, and the positive comments. See, this group of people is truly missing their kids. They're truly missing the classroom and teaching and mentoring. And it's been amazing to see how many teachers have come and put positive comments and the e-learning. And I have 2 kids that participate in e-learning. And what happens when the Chromebook fails to turn on? What do we do? And to be able to call the Wawasee School Corporation and say, hey, it's not working. And to have them meet us and give us a new one and ask the teacher a question, email, and then within a minute she responds. So that group of people, I want to give a shout out to say, hey, we haven't forgot about you, and what an amazing group.
I think you're right. They're teachers and everyone up and down, the nurses, the counselors, the administration are just working tirelessly because I think the kids are disappointed too.
Yeah,
they want to get back. So, Brad, anything else?
I would just like, I say this often, like in zoning meetings and stuff where we have really contentious discussions and stuff, but I've always noticed in our county, and it's something I'm very thankful for, that everybody at the end of the day can disagree on something, on an issue, but we really pull together as a community, and I sense that, and I'm very thankful to be a part of that.
Okay. All right. We will be back next Wednesday at 10:30. Same time, same place. And if we feel the need to get back with you sooner, we certainly will. But I think right now this has so far worked well, and certainly welcome your comments or questions. And we'll close for today. Thank you very much.
Thanks.